The first time she smiled at me, it wasn't flirtation, it was a quiet challenge. A look that said, "You're too young to handle me, but maybe you should try." I didn't know then that one smile would change how I saw love forever. I still remember the exact moment I met her. It's strange how some images never fade. The late afternoon sun poured through the open doorway of my friend's house, painting everything in a soft, honeyed glow. I'd come over to drop off a project file, not expecting to meet anyone, but then she appeared, his mother, Mrs. Mirza. She stood by the counter, tying her hair into a loose bun, strands escaping to frame her face. There was something quietly graceful about her, not the kind of beauty that demands attention, but the kind that draws it naturally. Her hands moved with calm precision as she set down a tray of teacups, and when her eyes lifted to meet mine, something in the air shifted. "You must be Ian," she said, her tone warm, amused even. "My son talks about you often. You're the one always fixing his computer issues, right?" I nodded, suddenly aware of how young I must have looked in that moment. Nervous smile, worn-out sneakers, the kind of awkward politeness you carry when you step into someone's home for the first time. "Yes, ma'am," I said instinctively. She chuckled, a soft sound that carried through the quiet room. "Please don't call me that. It makes me feel like a teacher." Her name was Zara, just Zara, and somehow, saying it felt different. I followed my friend upstairs, pretending not to notice the faint scent of her perfume. Jasmine, with a trace of something deeper, like old books and rain-soaked wood. It clung to the air, subtle but impossible to ignore. As we worked on our project, laughter echoing between us, my attention kept drifting. Once, when I looked down into the living room, I saw her sitting by the window, reading. The light fell across her face, tracing soft shadows along her cheek. She wasn't trying to be seen, yet I couldn't look away. When she noticed me, she didn't look startled. She just smiled, slow and knowing, as if she understood exactly what was going through my mind. I looked away quickly, pretending to be busy, but that smile stayed with me. Later, when I was leaving, she walked me to the door. "You boys never eat enough," she said, handing me a small container. "Take this home. It's nothing special, but it was special because it came from her." As I stepped outside, the evening breeze carried her scent again, soft and warm. I glanced back once, and she was still there, standing in the doorway, the faintest smile on her lips. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't anything defined. Just a moment suspended between two people who weren't supposed to notice each other, but did. And somewhere inside, a quiet thought began to take shape. Maybe she saw something in me too. That was the first spark, gentle, silent, but powerful enough to stay. It happened one quiet evening, the kind that seems ordinary until you realize later it changed something you can't name. My friend had gone out with his cousins, leaving me behind to finish a group assignment on his laptop. The house was unusually still. Only the sound of ceiling fans and the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the air. I was halfway through typing when her voice came from behind me. "You're still here." I turned, startled. She was standing in the doorway, wearing a simple off-white sweater, her hair loose for once. The light from the hall fell across her face, softening her features. "I didn't realize it was this late," I said, rubbing my eyes. She smiled, walking closer. "You must be hungry. Let me make you some tea." Before I could protest, she disappeared into the kitchen. I sat there, pretending to focus on my screen, but every sound, the clinking of cups, the hiss of boiling water, pulled my attention toward her. When she came back, she placed the cup gently beside me. "Careful, it's hot." Her fingers brushed mine, light, brief, but enough to make my heart stumble. "You work too seriously," she said, sitting across from me. "You remind me of myself at your age. Always trying to prove something." Her voice carried warmth, but there was a trace of melancholy beneath it. I asked softly, "Did you ever stop trying?" She smiled faintly. "Eventually. Life teaches you that not everything needs proving." The way she said it made me look up. There was a faraway look in her eyes, like she was remembering someone or something she'd lost along the way. For the first time, she didn't look like my friend's mom. She looked like a woman who'd lived, loved, and maybe hurt more deeply than she let on. We talked for a long time about small things at first, then deeper ones. She told me about her art classes, her travels, how she hadn't painted in years. I told her about my dreams of starting something on my own, of being more than what people expected. She listened, really listened, the way few people ever do. And every time she laughed, her eyes would light up in that quiet, genuine way that makes you feel seen. At one point, I said, "You talk like everything matters." She tilted her head, smiling. "And you listen like it does." For a moment, the silence between us grew soft, heavy, alive. The clock ticked quietly in the background. Her gaze lingered on me, not as a mother looking at her son's friend, but as a woman noticing someone she hadn't expected to. She finally looked away, exhaling a faint laugh. "Careful, Ian," she said gently. "Flattery from someone your age can be dangerous." But her smile betrayed her, calm on the surface, yet her eyes carried something unspoken. That night, as I left, I could still feel the warmth of her presence, in my chest, in the faint smell of tea on my hands, and in the echo of her voice whispering in my mind long after she was gone. After that night, something quiet but undeniable changed between us. It wasn't spoken about. It didn't need to be. There was just a shift. Every time I visited, her presence felt different, like the air itself recognized the two of us and held its breath. Sometimes I'd come over with my friend, sometimes on my own, pretending it was about assignments or errands. But if I was honest with myself, it wasn't the project that drew me there. It was her. She'd always greet me with that same teasing calm. "You again?" she'd say, pretending to sound surprised. I'd smile, pretending not to notice the glint of warmth in her eyes. One Saturday afternoon, when my friend was out, I offered to help her prepare dinner. She raised an eyebrow. "Do you even know how to cook?" "Only the basics," I said, "but I can cut onions without crying." "That counts, right?" She laughed, a sound soft enough to make the room feel lighter. "Fine, you could be my assistant chef." For the next hour, we worked side by side in the kitchen, chopping, stirring, stealing glances when the other wasn't looking. The air filled with the smell of spices and warmth, and though we barely touched, I could feel her presence everywhere, in the rhythm of her movements, in the way she brushed her hair back with her wrist, in the soft hum she made when she cooked. At one point, while reaching for a bowl, our hands met. Just a fleeting touch, but it felt different this time. Neither of us moved right away. Her eyes lifted to mine, steady, unguarded. For a moment, everything went still, the clinking of utensils, the simmering of the pot. Even the clock seemed to pause. Then she pulled back gently, clearing her throat. "You're getting better at this," she said, her voice softer than before. "Cooking?" I asked. She smiled, shaking her head. At looking at people like that, her words lingered long after. That night, when I went home, I caught myself replaying the way she'd said it. Like she'd felt the same pull, but couldn't let it show. Days turned into weeks, and our moments grew longer. Sometimes she'd call me to help fix something around the house. The printer, the Wi-Fi, the garden lights. I knew she could have easily called someone else, but she didn't. And every time I left, she'd say, "Thank you, Ian," in that tone that sounded like gratitude, but carried something deeper, something unspoken. It wasn't just affection. It was connection, quiet, careful, but real. The kind that builds not through words, but through the spaces between them. By then, I knew what was happening, and I think she did too. But neither of us said it, because saying it would make it real. And for now, it was enough to live in the silence, where everything was both safe and dangerously alive. It was an evening wrapped in rain, one of those dusky hours when the world feels suspended between light and darkness. The clouds had rolled in early, painting the sky a deep gray, and the air smelled of wet soil and jasmine. I'd come over to return a book she'd lent me, but my friend wasn't home. It was just her, sitting on the porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the rain fall through the soft glow of the porch light. She turned as I approached, offering that gentle smile that always seemed to disarm me. "You didn't have to come all the way for that," she said, nodding at the book in my hand. I shrugged. I was passing by. It was a lie, and she knew it. Her smile widened just slightly, like she was too kind to call me out on it. "You can sit," she said, patting the space beside her. So I did. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It never was. We watched the rain together, drops sliding down the railing, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. After a while, she spoke softly, almost to herself. "People would misunderstand this, you know." I turned toward her. "This?" She nodded, still looking out at the rain. "You being here, me enjoying your company more than I probably should." Her words fell quietly, but they hit deep. There was no guilt in her tone, just honesty. Vulnerable, unfiltered honesty. "I don't care what people think," I said, almost in a whisper. She gave a quiet, disbelieving laugh. "You will. One day, when the world teaches you to measure everything by what it approves of." She looked tired for a moment, her strength softening at the edges. I wanted to tell her that she didn't have to explain herself, that the world didn't get to define the peace we found in each other's presence. But before I could, a small gust of wind lifted the corner of her shawl. I instinctively reached out to hold it down, and in doing so, my hand brushed against her arm. Her skin was warm against my fingers, and though it was only a second, it felt like something fragile and dangerous had just been crossed. She froze, not pulling away, but not leaning closer either. "You shouldn't," she said finally, her voice barely above a breath. "I know," I replied, "but I don't want to stop." That made her turn to look at me. Really look. Her eyes held a storm of things she couldn't say. Then, slowly, almost with a sigh, she murmured, "You're too young to handle me. Want to try anyway?" Her tone was half playful, half trembling with something real. And before I could even think of what to say, she looked away, shaking her head with a soft, nervous laugh. Forget I said that, but I couldn't. The words hung between us like lightning that had flashed but never struck, illuminating everything, even the things we were afraid to admit. That night, as I walked home through the drizzle, her voice echoed in my mind, wrapped in equal parts warmth and warning. It wasn't a confession. It was a crack in the wall she'd built, one I knew I'd spend the next days quietly standing before, wondering if she'd ever open it again. The days after that night felt strangely heavier, as if every word, every glance carried something unspoken beneath it. We didn't talk about what she'd said. That line, half playful, half achingly real, but it lingered like a melody that wouldn't fade. Our conversations grew quieter, our smiles a little slower, yet neither of us could stay away for long. One afternoon, I dropped by to help fix the garden lights that had stopped working. The sun was dipping low, turning everything gold, and she was kneeling among the flower pots, her hands covered in soil, her hair falling loose. She looked up when she heard me. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, a soft laugh escaping her. "Not when something's worth fixing," I replied, crouching beside her. Her eyes flickered with something I couldn't name, admiration, maybe, or fear. "Everything can't be fixed, Ian," she murmured. "Some things just fade. Only if you stop trying," I said gently. She looked away, pretending to focus on the plants. "You talk like you haven't been hurt yet." I hesitated, studying her profile, the calmness in her voice that didn't quite hide the tremor underneath. "And you talk like you stopped believing it's possible to heal." She froze. The air between us thickened. Then, slowly, she sat back on her heels, wiping her hands on her shawl. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because I might believe them." There it was, the quiet confession that didn't need to be named. She didn't look at me right away, and when she finally did, her eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. "You have this way of seeing through people," she said quietly. "It's disarming." "Maybe I just see what others overlook," I said. Her lips curved into a faint, wistful smile. "You shouldn't have to look so deeply at someone like me." I shook my head. "Someone like you?" A woman who forgot what it's like to be noticed. The honesty in her voice hit me harder than I expected. Without thinking, I reached out, just lightly, brushing away a small streak of dirt from her cheek. She didn't move. Her breath caught for a second, but she didn't pull back. "You never stopped being someone worth noticing," I said softly. Her eyes glistened, and for the first time, she didn't try to hide it. She placed her hand gently over mine, warm, trembling, real. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep, she whispered. I'm not promising, I said. I'm just telling the truth. We sat like that for a moment, surrounded by the golden light, the scent of damp earth, and the sound of the wind moving softly through the leaves. When she finally stood, she smiled faintly. You're impossible, you know that? Maybe, I said, smiling back. But I'm not walking away. She shook her head with that half-laugh I'd grown addicted to. You already walked too close. And even though neither of us said it, we both knew something had shifted again, something deep, irreversible, and quietly beautiful. It was late one night when I found her again, not by plan, not by chance, but by something in between. My friend had gone out for the weekend, and I'd stopped by to drop off his charger. The house was dimly lit, quiet except for a soft melody drifting from the living room. Zara was there, sitting on the couch with her feet tucked under her, a shawl draped loosely around her shoulders. The music, an old love song playing softly from her phone, filled the silence in a way words couldn't. She looked up, surprised but not startled. You're here, she said gently. Inappropriate. Door was open. She smiled faintly. I was just listening to something from my college days. It's strange how a song can take you back to who you used to be. Her voice was distant, almost wistful. I stepped closer, unsure if I should stay. You seem different tonight, I said. She looked at me then, really looked. Different, or just honest. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The music carried on between us, slow and aching. Then, unexpectedly, she stood and extended her hand toward me. Dance with me, she said softly. I hesitated. I don't really know how. Her lips curved into a smile. Neither do I. That's the fun part. I took her hand. It was warm, a steady kind of warmth that traveled up my arm and straight into my chest. She guided my other hand to her waist, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to fade away. We moved slowly, without rhythm or direction, just letting the moment carry us. The faint rustle of her shawl brushed against my wrist, her perfume, jasmine and rain, filling the small distance between us. Her head rested lightly against my shoulder, and I could feel her breath, soft and unhurried, near my collar. You make me feel seen, she whispered, voice trembling like a confession she hadn't meant to speak aloud. I closed my eyes. You are seen. She let out a faint laugh, but it broke halfway. You don't know what that means, Ian. You'll move on one day, and I'll just be a memory in a story you tell. I pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Then I'll make sure it's a beautiful one. Her gaze lingered, tender, afraid, longing, and then she leaned forward, resting her forehead lightly against mine. No words, no promises, just breath shared between two people who understood too much and said too little. When the song ended, we didn't move. The room was still, the only sound our hearts adjusting to what had just happened. Finally, she whispered, this shouldn't feel right. Maybe, I said, voice low, but it does. She smiled then, soft, defeated, beautiful. You're going to make this very hard to forget. And even though neither of us said it, we both knew something between us had crossed the line from quiet warmth into something unspoken, powerful, and deeply human. The morning after that night, the world felt quieter, like everything was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. I hadn't planned to see her again so soon, but my heart wouldn't rest until I did. The house was the same, yet it felt different now. Heavier, fuller, like it remembered the rhythm of that slow, imperfect dance. Zara was in the garden this time, trimming her rose bushes. The early sun caught the streaks of silver in her hair, making her look both strong and fragile in a way that made my chest ache. She noticed me at the gate and smiled. Not the teasing smile she'd worn before, but something gentler, touched with something final. I thought you might come, she said, setting down the shears. I didn't know where else to go, I admitted. She brushed her hands against her apron, a small, grounding gesture. Sometimes, that's exactly what makes it harder, not knowing where to go when your heart is full. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The garden hummed softly around us, bees drifting near blossoms, a faint breeze carrying the scent of roses. It all felt painfully ordinary and yet sacred. Finally, she said quietly, "Last night was beautiful, and wrong, and honest." I took a small step forward, searching her eyes. "So what happens now?" She looked down at her hands, then back at me. "Now, we remember it for what it was, a moment that reminded us we're still alive." Her words settled like rain, gentle, inevitable. I wanted to argue, to tell her I didn't care about right or wrong. But the calm in her face told me she'd already fought that battle in her mind long before I'd arrived. "You deserve someone who hasn't already lived half her life," she said softly. "Someone who can build a future with you, not just a memory." "I don't want a memory," I said, voice rough. "I want you." Her eyes softened, but she shook her head. "You want what you felt, the closeness, the honesty, the warmth. But those things aren't mine to keep giving. You'll find them again, with someone who's meant to stay." There was no bitterness in her tone, just quiet truth. She stepped closer, close enough that I could feel her warmth again, that same scent of jasmine brushing the air between us. Her hand reached up, fingertips grazing my cheek. "You changed something in me," she whispered. "You reminded me that my heart still remembers how to feel." I covered her hand with mine, holding it there for one long, suspended moment. "And you," I said, "taught me what love sounds like when it's quiet." Her eyes shimmered, but she smiled through it. Then she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to my cheek. Light as breath, final as sunset. "Goodbye, Ian." I stood there long after she'd gone inside, the scent of roses mixing with the echo of her touch. It wasn't the ending I wanted, but it was the one that felt true. And maybe that's what real love is. Not possession, not forever, but the quiet grace of having met someone who made your heart grow a little larger before letting it go.